I watched my son pack away my husband's old armchair, the one where he'd sat every night for 35 years, to make space for his mother-in-law's recliner. That's when it hit me. My own home wasn't mine anymore. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. My name is Ruth, and before I tell you what happened next, let me ask, where are you watching from today? I always find it comforting to know who's out there listening. Maybe someone out there will understand what I felt that day, the feeling of being quietly replaced in your own life. It started 2 months ago, on an ordinary Thursday morning. The kind of morning where you don't expect your world to shift. The kettle was whistling, the sun spilling gently across the kitchen counter, and the scent of fresh bread filled the room. I was humming, thinking about calling my sister, when Daniel, my only son, walked in with a look I hadn't seen since he was a boy who'd broken something expensive and didn't know how to confess. He cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we've decided something." I turned, smiling, half expecting him to say they were going on vacation or buying a new house. Instead, his next words froze me in place. "My wife, our kids, and her mother are moving in. It's decided. We'll be here by Sunday." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. Moving in? All of them? Into this house, the one his father and I built from scratch? The one with my garden, my kitchen, my peace? I set down my mug, my fingers trembling. "Daniel, sweetheart, what do you mean moving in? For how long?" He gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. "Just for a while. You know how the rent's gone up and Melissa's mom needs help since her surgery. We thought this would be best for everyone." "We thought," he said, "not you and I. Just we, as in him and Melissa." I felt something inside me twist a sharp, quiet sting that words can't name. I tried to reason with him gently. "Danny, I love having you all here for visits, but this isn't a big house anymore. And..." He cut me off, eyes hardening in a way that startled me. "Mom, we've already decided. I'll go help them pack." And just like that, he grabbed his car keys and left. No hug, no discussion, no kindness. The door closed, and the silence that followed felt heavier than grief. I sank into a chair, staring at the empty space where his father's armchair had been. I'd kept that chair for 15 years since my husband passed a small reminder that some things, at least, could stay the same. But that morning, I realized nothing stays the same, not even love that you think is unshakable. When I told my sister on the phone, she gasped, "Ruth, you can't let them do that. Your peace isn't theirs to take." I smiled weakly and said, "He's my son. Maybe it'll only be for a little while, but deep down I already knew better." That evening, I stood in the doorway of the living room, staring at the shelves. Every photo, every keepsake, every memory of my husband and me was there. Yet suddenly I could already see it all being replaced. Melissa's bright decor, her mother's loud laugh, the noise of children, the rearranging of things that once had meaning. I thought about Daniel as a little boy, how he'd sit cross-legged on the floor, building toy houses, saying, "One day I'll build you a big house too, Mom." And now, here he was, moving into mine, not as a gift, but as a takeover. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The house groaned and sighed with every gust of wind, like it knew what was coming. I got up and walked through each room, running my fingers along the walls, whispering memories aloud to the empty air. "This was your father's shelf," I said softly, "and this was the window he fixed during the first winter storm." I paused at the kitchen doorway, the spot where Daniel had taken his first steps, and whispered, "What happened to the boy who used to love this home as much as I did?" The next morning, I started preparing for their arrival cleaning, moving things, making space. But every box I packed felt like I was erasing another piece of myself. By Saturday night, their rooms were ready. My heart wasn't. And as I sat in bed that night, listening to the faint echo of my husband's laughter in memory, I whispered into the dark, I don't know what's coming, but I'll find a way to protect this home. I owe him that. Because somewhere inside that heartbreak, a spark was forming a quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't let them take everything from me. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that used to smell of lilacs and roast chicken. This time it smelled of exhaust, cardboard boxes, and the faint scent of someone else's perfume. I watched from the porch as Daniel's car pulled up, the trunk piled high, another van right behind it. Out tumbled the kids. First little Noah and Emma, their laughter carrying through the air, bright and innocent. Then came Melissa, perfectly composed as always, her hair tied back in that sleek bun she never seemed to loosen. Behind her was Gloria, Melissa's mother, moving slowly with a cane, but sharp-eyed enough to scan every inch of the house, like she was already evaluating it. Daniel walked over, kissed my cheek quickly, and said, "Mom, we'll try not to be too much trouble." I smiled faintly. "Of course, sweetheart. Welcome home." But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't home anymore, not the way it used to be. Boxes cluttered the hallway within minutes. Shoes, bags, children's toys, everything spilled into spaces that once felt open and calm. The walls that had heard decades of quiet mornings now echoed with unfamiliar noise. Melissa took command almost immediately. "We'll put the kids in the spare room and Mom in the study. Oh, Ruth, I hope you don't mind, she needs a quiet space, and that back room has such good light." I froze. The study. My late husband's study. The room where his book still sat untouched, his fountain pen still resting in its holder, as if he'd only stepped away for a moment. I wanted to say no. I wanted to shout, "That's his room, not yours." But Daniel was smiling at me, tired, hopeful, pleading silently for me not to make it harder. So I nodded. Of course. By the second day, the kitchen had transformed. Gloria rearranged the pantry, moving my spices, where they made more sense. Melissa replaced my floral tablecloth with something modern and clean. Even my coffee mugs, the mismatched set my husband and I collected from our road trips, disappeared, replaced by uniform white cups that looked sterile on the shelves. It's strange how quickly you can vanish in your own home, not suddenly, but piece by piece. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to find Melissa handing a box of my wedding china to a donation truck outside. "Oh, Ruth," she said brightly, as if nothing were wrong. "These were chipped and outdated. I figured you wouldn't mind." I just stood there. I couldn't find my voice. That china had survived 3 moves, 2 children, and 1 beautiful marriage. But I let her go on smiling as if she'd done me a favor. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The moonlight fell across the hall, and I could hear laughter coming from the living room. Gloria's laughter, the kind that rattles the air and makes silence impossible. She was telling stories, commanding attention, her voice filling the space that used to be my sanctuary. I sat by my window, staring at the garden. My roses were wilting. I hadn't watered them in 2 days. "I'll take care of it tomorrow," I whispered to myself. But even as I said it, I knew I was losing more than just the flowers. A few days later, I overheard something that hollowed me out completely. Melissa and Daniel were in the kitchen. I had stepped into the hallway quietly to fetch a glass of water when I heard Melissa's voice, calm, almost casual. "You know, once everything's settled, we might as well make the house ours completely. It's better for the kids long term." Daniel didn't answer right away. The silence between them was long enough for me to feel it in my bones. Then finally, I heard him say softly, "Let's not talk about that right now." I backed away before they could see me. My hands were trembling so badly I had to steady myself against the wall. They wanted to make it theirs, not share it, not borrow it, own it. And my son, my boy, didn't say no. The next morning, I found Gloria sitting in the garden with a cup of tea. She looked up at me and said cheerfully, "Lovely place you have here, Ruth. It's such a blessing that Daniel and Melissa will take care of it now. You must feel relieved." Relieved. That word cut deeper than any insult could have. I forced a smile. "Yes," I said softly, "relieved." But inside, something else was stirring, not relief, not resignation. Something quieter, stronger, almost frightening in its clarity. That evening, I walked through the house again, this time not in sorrow, but in assessment. I noticed which rooms they used the most, which doors they kept open, which spaces they ignored. I began to see the house the way my husband once did, as a plan, not a prison. They thought they were settling in, but I was beginning to wake up. Because when your home starts to forget you, you either fade with it or you remind it who it belongs to. And I wasn't about to fade. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise I felt a little more like a ghost in my own home. It wasn't just the noise or the clutter. It was the small, invisible ways they erased me, the absence of my choices, my rhythm, my place. The house no longer smelled like me. It smelled like Melissa's perfume, Gloria's liniment, and reheated dinners that never tasted like love. Every morning, Gloria would sit in the study, my husband's study, with the windows wide open, her music blaring some old show tune. She'd laugh at nothing in particular, her voice carrying down the hallway like an uninvited echo. And I'd sit quietly at the kitchen table stirring my tea, waiting for the laughter to stop. Sometimes Noah would come to me with his toys. He used to call me Grandma Ruth, but lately Melissa corrected him gently. "Sweetheart, just call her Grandma. Nana's your real grandma." Nana. That was Gloria's title now. And little by little, the word grandma began to sound like something borrowed, something that no longer belonged to me. One afternoon, I tried to bake cookies with Emma the way I used to. She was 6, with her mother's eyes and my son's stubbornness. As we rolled the dough, Melissa walked in, frowned at the flour on the counter, and said, "Oh, Ruth, please don't give her that much sugar. You know how we're trying to limit sweets." I wanted to tell her that a little sugar never ruined a childhood, but I just smiled and said, "Of course, dear." After that, Emma stopped asking to bake with me. I started spending more time outside, in the garden, what was left of it. The roses were barely hanging on. The soil was dry. I'd always found peace there, hands in the dirt, sun on my face. But now, even the garden seemed foreign. Gloria had planted new flowers. To brighten it up, she said. Plastic stakes labeled marigold and daisy stood where my husband's tulips once bloomed. And still, Daniel stayed quiet. He was polite, busy, always tired from work. When we did speak, his eyes darted away like a boy caught between loyalty and guilt. I thought about confronting him 100 times, asking him why he let this happen. But every time I looked at him, I saw the little boy he used to be. The one who'd cry when his father scolded him. The one I'd rock to sleep on stormy nights. How do you confront your own child without breaking both your hearts? So instead, I began to write. Just small entries in my old leather journal. Thoughts, prayers, pieces of memory. I wrote about my husband, how he'd laugh so hard the windows rattled, how he'd built the fence out back by hand, how he'd whisper, "This house will always be yours, Ruth, no matter what happens." Those words became my anchor. But even an anchor can't hold forever. One evening, while tidying Daniel's room, yes, his room, the one he still called temporary storage, I found a folder on the dresser. At first I thought it was just bills, but then I saw my name printed across the top of one document. It was a property transfer form. My breath caught. My vision blurred. Daniel's name was listed as the prospective owner. The paper wasn't signed, not yet, but it was there, printed, ready. There were notes in Melissa's handwriting in the margins. "We can finalize once Mom's settled." My hands shook so badly I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. It felt like the walls closed in around me. All those years of love, of sacrifice, of raising him with every ounce of my strength, and this was the return. Not gratitude, not care, but quiet betrayal dressed as practicality. That night, I didn't cry, not once. I just sat by the window, listening to the hum of laughter downstairs, Melissa's, Gloria's, Daniel's. It felt like the soundtrack of my own erasure. When I finally lay in bed, the moonlight cutting across the room, I whispered into the dark, "You promised me, didn't you?" It wasn't to Daniel. It was to my husband. To the memory of him standing in that same room saying, "No matter what happens, this house will always be yours." I turned toward the window and closed my eyes. That promise echoed back like a heartbeat, slow but steady. And for the first time in weeks, my thoughts stopped circling in fear. They began to move forward, deliberate, certain. The next morning, I made a list, a quiet one. Names, numbers, plans. If they thought I was a fragile old woman waiting to fade away, they were about to be very surprised, because the unraveling wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs, and they just didn't know it yet. The morning after I found those papers, I stood in the kitchen and watched the sun rise through the lace curtains. The light spilled across the floor, soft and golden, the same light that had once woken my husband every morning. He'd stretch, kiss me on the cheek, and say, "Another day to take care of what's ours, Ruth." That phrase echoed now, clearer than ever. What's ours? By the time the coffee finished brewing, my decision had already settled inside me like stone. I wasn't going to beg, argue, or plead. Those days were gone. Instead, I was going to protect what was mine with grace, not anger. That afternoon, I took the bus into town. I hadn't ridden it in years, not since Daniel started driving me everywhere. The driver gave me a kind smile as I climbed aboard, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to freedom. I visited Harold, my late husband's old friend and our family lawyer for decades. His office smelled of dust and old wood, the same as it always had. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, concern creasing his brow. "Ruth, it's been years. What brings you here?" I smiled gently. "I just wanted to make sure everything with my home is still in order." He nodded, gestured for me to sit, and pulled out the files. After a few moments of reading, he looked up and said, "It's still yours, Ruth, entirely. No transfers, no joint ownerships. You're secure." Those words felt like oxygen. I leaned back in the chair, relief washing over me like warm rain. "Good," I said softly. "That's all I needed to know." Before I left, Harold looked at me curiously. "Everything all right at home?" I gave him the kind of smile that says everything and nothing at once. "Not yet," I said, "but it will be." That evening, I went straight to the back of the house, to the little guest house my husband had built years ago for visitors. It had fallen into disrepair over time, dusty, neglected, forgotten, much like me. But I saw potential. I saw freedom. I began cleaning quietly, day by day. I scrubbed floors, aired out curtains, polished old windows until the glass shone clear again. Each task steadied me, gave me focus, while Melissa and Gloria busied themselves in the main house, redecorating and rearranging. I worked silently outside, humming the same tune my husband used to whistle. Daniel barely noticed. When he did, he just said, "That's great, Mom. Keeps you busy, huh?" Busy. That's what he thought. I was an aging woman with too much time on her hands. They had no idea I was preparing something much bigger. Weeks passed and their arrogance grew. Melissa began referring to the house as our place. Gloria hosted her friends in my living room, showing off furniture that wasn't hers to display. And one afternoon, I overheard Daniel saying on the phone, "Yeah, Mom will move out eventually. We're just giving her time." That sentence didn't hurt me. It clarified me. If they wanted a future without me in this house, then that was exactly what they would get, but not the way they imagined. One morning, over breakfast, I said casually, "I've been thinking of making a few changes around the house. It's getting old, and I'd like to make sure it's taken care of properly." Melissa didn't look up from her phone. "Oh, that's wonderful, Ruth. I can help coordinate the renovations." I smiled politely. Thank you, dear, but I'll handle this one myself. Gloria raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. You shouldn't overexert yourself at your age. Let the young ones do the heavy work. I met her gaze evenly. I've handled heavier things in my life, Gloria. The table went quiet after that. Even Daniel didn't speak. That afternoon, I made a few phone calls to a local contractor, to a locksmith, and to a property manager Harold had recommended. By the end of the week, the wheels were in motion. I had plans drawn up for the house to be divided, half to be rented out, half kept private. The guest house would be my home. It wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. About reclaiming what had been quietly stolen, piece by piece, not through malice, but through complacency. And I refused to be complacent anymore. That night, as I walked through the hallway, I noticed how the evening light caught on the family photos. In one of them, my husband was smiling, holding Daniel as a baby. I reached out and traced his face with my fingertip. I'm fixing it, I whispered. I promise you I'm fixing it. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Because the fire that had once been grief was now something else, entirely resolve. They thought they were living in their house, but soon they'd realize I'd been rebuilding mine. The day it all came to light was a Tuesday, the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary sunlight pouring gently through the curtains, the smell of toast, the faint hum of traffic outside. But behind that calm, the air felt electric, charged, ready. I was in the garden when I heard the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway. Not Daniel's car, not Melissa's sleek SUV, a moving truck. The workers stepped out, glancing down at their papers before walking toward the porch. I could hear Melissa's voice from inside, shrill, confused, and rising. What do you mean, moving the furniture? Who ordered this? I didn't answer right away. I kept pruning the roses until Daniel appeared at the door, his voice sharp with disbelief. Mom, what's going on? Why are there people here touching our furniture? I straightened up slowly, brushed the dirt from my gloves, and looked at him. They're not your furniture, Daniel. They're mine. And they're being moved because the main house is being converted. He frowned. Converted? Into what? I walked up to the porch, calm as still water. A duplex. I'm renting out the front portion. For a moment, silence. Melissa came storming out, her phone clutched in her hand, eyes blazing. You can't be serious, Ruth. You can't just make a decision like that without discussing it with us. I met her fury with quiet steadiness. You seem to think this is a shared decision. It's not. This house belongs to me, and I've decided it's time for it to serve its purpose again as a home, not a battleground. Gloria appeared next, shuffling behind them with a cane but full of indignation. This is outrageous. You can't expect us to pack up and leave. I folded my hands together, steady and deliberate. I'm not expecting anything. I'm informing you. The new tenants will move into the front half in 2 weeks. You have that long to make other arrangements. Daniel's face went red. Mom, this isn't fair. We moved in because we needed help. I nodded, and I gave it. I opened my doors, my heart, my peace. I fed your children. I made room for your wife and her mother. But what you wanted wasn't help, Daniel. You wanted ownership. He blinked, caught off guard. That's not true. I raised a hand gently, cutting him off. It is. I saw the papers. His mouth fell open. He didn't need to ask which papers. Melissa's voice cracked through the air. Daniel, what papers? He looked down, jaw tightening. It was just an idea. Nothing was finalized. I turned to Melissa, an idea that involved taking my home while I was still alive. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. You all made me feel like a guest in the only place that ever felt like mine. You stripped away my comfort, my memories, my dignity, all under the name of family. Daniel took a step toward me, guilt flickering in his eyes. Mom, I just wanted to make things easier. Easier for who? I asked softly. For you or for me? He didn't answer. I looked at each of them in turn, my son, his wife, her mother standing there on the porch that my husband had built with his own hands. The wind rustled through the garden, carrying the faint scent of the roses that had survived every season, no matter how harsh. "I won't fight with you," I said at last, "but I won't disappear either. I've spent a lifetime building a home, not just walls and windows, but love, roots, and peace, and I won't let anyone take that from me." Melissa scoffed, her voice trembling with anger. "This is ridiculous. Where are we supposed to go?" I looked toward the guest house at the back of the property, its newly painted walls glinting in the sunlight. "That's not for me to decide, but I suggest you start packing." For the first time, Gloria had no clever retort. She simply looked away. Daniel's voice broke softly. "Mom, please, don't do this." I stepped closer, touched his arm gently. "I already did, sweetheart, because you didn't leave me another choice." He stared at me, the anger slowly giving way to something else. Regret. Then he turned away and muttered, "We'll talk later." They all went inside. The door closed behind them with a dull, final sound. I stood there on the porch for a long time, the breeze lifting the hem of my sweater, the garden quiet around me. For the first time in months, the air felt clean again, not heavy, not crowded. I looked up at the sky, whispering to the memory of my husband. "It's done." I finally stood up, but deep down I knew it wasn't over yet, because Daniel would come back. He always did. And when he did, everything would change one last time. They were gone for 3 days. 3 long, blissful, silent days. I had offered them time to collect their things, to think, to cool the storm. But Daniel didn't speak to me before leaving. He just packed the car with Melissa, the children, and Gloria, and drove away without looking back. The moment the sound of that engine faded down the street, I finally exhaled. The air around me felt lighter, almost alive again. I spent those 3 days putting my plan into motion, not revenge. I was long past that. It was restoration, renewal. By the time they returned, everything had changed. That Sunday morning, a faint hum of an engine broke the calm. I looked up from my teacup, sitting by the window as Daniel's car slowed to a stop outside the gate. The children were asleep in the back seat. Melissa stepped out first, sunglasses on, her lips pressed in a hard line. Gloria followed, muttering to herself. And then Daniel, my son, stood still, staring at the house as though it were a stranger, because it was. The white paint that once peeled from years of neglect was now gone, replaced by a soft, earthy tone that glowed under the morning sun. The garden had been trimmed, the weeds pulled, the path lined with smooth stones that caught the light. New windows gleamed, and above the door, where a brass nameplate once said, "The Burtons," now stood 3 simple words: Rosewood Haven. They froze at the sight. I saw Melissa's mouth fall open slightly, then snap shut. Daniel's brow furrowed. He walked up to the porch, his voice tight. "Mom, what did you do?" I stepped out slowly, holding a linen cloth in my hands, my old gardening gloves still tucked into my belt. "I told you I was converting the house," I said simply. "Now you're seeing the result." Gloria's eyes darted toward the side yard. "Where's our stuff? Our furniture?" I pointed toward the guest house, its windows open, curtains fluttering. "Safe and sound. I had it all moved there. You'll find everything neatly arranged. You said you wanted space for yourselves. Now you have it." Melissa's voice came sharp, incredulous. You turned your own house into a rental? You can't be serious." I smiled faintly. "I've never been more serious. The front part of the house is now a small independent suite. I'll be living in the back section. The rest, well, I've already found tenants." Daniel blinked. "Tenants?" "A lovely young couple expecting their first child. They needed a home, not just a roof. It felt right." Melissa's face flushed red. "You're insane. You're letting strangers live here?" I met her glare steadily. "They're not strangers. They're people who appreciate what a home means, something I realized not everyone does." Daniel took a slow step forward, his voice trembling between anger and shame. "Mom, you didn't have to go this far. You didn't have to make this..." I stopped him gently. I did, Daniel, because if I didn't, this house would have turned into something I wouldn't recognize. I built my life here with your father. Every brick, every corner carries our laughter, our fights, our beginnings, and I'll be damned if it ends as a battlefield of resentment. He swallowed hard, looking away. I was just trying to help. By taking control? I asked softly. By letting someone else, someone who barely tolerated me, dictate what happens under my roof. Melissa looked down, arms crossed, the fight fading from her eyes. Gloria, for once, said nothing. The children woke up in the car and ran toward me, their laughter slicing through the tension like sunlight through the clouds. Grandma, look, the house looks so pretty. I knelt down, hugging them close. Their tiny arms around my neck reminded me of what still mattered. Thank you, sweethearts. It's finally how it's supposed to be. When I looked up, Daniel was standing there, his expression unreadable, the pride in him, the defensiveness, the guilt. It all seemed to crumble at once. He said quietly, "You really went and did it." "I did," I replied, "and it's done. There's no undoing it." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his shoulders dropped. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I thought I was stepping up." I touched his cheek lightly the way I used to when he was little. Sometimes stepping up means stepping back. Melissa turned away, brushing a tear from her cheek, pretending to adjust her sunglasses. Gloria muttered something under her breath and went to the car. Daniel sighed. "So where do we go from here?" "You start fresh," I said gently. "You find a place that belongs to you, not your wife's mother, not me, just your family, and you build it together." He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my son again. Not the man tangled in pride and pressure, just Daniel. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's what we needed all along. I smiled, tears warming my eyes. Maybe it is. They drove off quietly that afternoon. No shouting, no resentment, just a silent understanding, the kind that grows only after storms. As the car disappeared around the corner, I stood on the porch and let the stillness return. The garden swayed gently in the breeze. Somewhere, a robin sang. And for the first time in years, I felt peace settle over the house like a blessing. "Welcome home," I whispered to myself. It's been 6 months since that day. 6 months since Daniel and his family drove away, leaving the driveway as silent as the first snow of winter. The young couple, Mia and Aaron, moved into the front suite soon after. They brought life back into the house in ways I hadn't expected. There's laughter again. There's music. There's a baby's crib near the window, and every evening I hear their voices, warm, soft, full of plans for the future. Sometimes I catch myself smiling just listening to them. I spend my mornings in the garden, trimming the roses that never gave up on blooming, even when the house felt like it was falling apart. I think about how much I learned in these quiet months about myself, about love, about what it means to let go without losing. Because that's what I had to do. Let go of control, of guilt, of the idea that peace only comes through keeping everyone happy. No, peace came the moment I stopped apologizing for needing my own space. A few weeks ago, Daniel came to visit. He came alone. I was sitting on the porch, sipping my tea, when I saw his car pull up. He looked older somehow, not in years, but in weight, the kind that doesn't show on the face, but in the eyes. He stood at the gate for a long moment before walking in. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hi, sweetheart." He looked around, smiling faintly. "The house looks peaceful." I nodded. "It feels that way, too." He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything, for how we made you feel. Melissa, she's been thinking a lot, too. We're looking for a smaller place, just us and the kids." "That's good," I said gently. "You'll make it a home in your own way." He nodded again, his eyes glistening. I thought I was helping you by moving in. I didn't realize I was taking away your peace." I reached out and took his hand. "We all learn through mistakes, Daniel. What matters is that you saw it before it was too late." He smiled that soft, boyish smile I hadn't seen in years. "I miss this," he said quietly. So did I. We sat together on the porch for a long while, saying nothing more, just two souls who had finally understood each other again, not through control or guilt, but through acceptance. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. "You're stronger than I ever realized," he whispered. I smiled into his shoulder. "No, darling, I just stopped being afraid to be myself." After he left, I walked through the garden. The evening light danced on the petals, painting everything gold. I thought about all the nights I had cried quietly in this very yard, wondering if I'd failed as a mother, as a woman, as a keeper of peace. But I see it differently now. Sometimes love means opening your doors wide. Sometimes it means closing them. And sometimes the hardest part, it means knowing which one to do. I kept thinking of something my husband once said when we first built this home. A house doesn't stay alive because people live in it. It stays alive because it's cared for. I understand those words now more than ever. This house, my house, isn't just wood and stone. It's memory, forgiveness, and faith. It's the story of a woman who refused to let her kindness be mistaken for weakness. It's the story of a mother who finally remembered her worth. At night, I sit by the window and watch the soft light glowing from the suite out front. I see the silhouettes of Mia and Aaron as they rock their newborn to sleep. I see Daniel's messages pop up sometimes, photos of the kids at their new school, Melissa baking cookies, even Gloria smiling awkwardly at a birthday party. And I realize healing doesn't always come in grand apologies or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it comes in silence, in time, in the gentle rhythm of life moving forward. The house breathes again. So do I. I close my eyes and whisper to the night. It was never about losing them. It was about finding myself again. Then I smile, sip my tea, and listen to the wind carry through the roses, those stubborn, faithful roses that refuse to stop blooming. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had, I whisper one last time. And that fire finally became my light.